I overheard my family planning to humiliate me at Christmas, so I sent a gift that ended the entire celebration in front of everyone. It still feels surreal to say it out loud, but that night, under a ceiling of golden lights with the smell of pine resin still clinging to my hands, I realized I had crossed an invisible line. If anyone asked me when I stopped seeing my parents and my brother as family, and started seeing them for who they really were, I'd point to that exact moment. It was December 23rd, and my truck was parked behind the family estate, a white colonial mansion with perfect black shutters and a porch designed purely for show. Every inch of it looked like a staged photograph, the opposite of my world of soil, wood, and honest work. I had just finished unloading the rarest piece I'd cultivated that year, a white fir bonsai trained into a spiral over the course of 7 patient winters. A living sculpture. My parents had requested it as a Christmas favor, which was their polite way of saying bring something valuable and don't expect to be paid, because what you do isn't real work. I carried it inside through the service entrance, leaving faint wet footprints on the polished floors. I was looking for my mother to ask where she wanted the bonsai displayed when I heard voices coming from the media room, bright, eager, rehearsed. I wasn't supposed to overhear anything. I should have set the tree down, walked out, driven home, gone back to my real life. But one sentence snagged me like a hook. And when the slide of Claire covered in mud comes up, that's your cue. Say the line about what happens when someone rejects opportunities. It kills every time. My name. My photo. My work. Turned into a joke. I stepped closer, holding my breath. Through the narrow opening in the doorway, I saw my brother laughing as he pointed to a projected image, me, in the greenhouse earlier that year, hair wild, hands deep in soil, exhausted but happy. My mother corrected his delivery as if they were directing a stage play. My father added that self-deprecating family humor would make the investors adore them. Slide after slide. Caption after caption. Every one of them framing me as a cautionary tale, proof of what happens when you don't follow the Whitaker path. And in that moment, I felt the cold climb up my spine until it reached something hardened and immovable. 2 truths crystallized inside me. First, they were never going to respect me. Second, I had the power to ruin that night, and I wasn't afraid to use it. If you want to understand how I ended up there, half hidden behind a doorway, listening to my own family rehearse a public execution of my dignity, you have to understand what Christmas looked like in the Whitaker house. From the outside, it was perfect. Our family home sat at the end of a long, curved driveway lined with old oaks that my father had paid a landscape architect a small fortune to shape into something picturesque. In December, those trees were wrapped in white fairy lights so carefully spaced they almost looked printed onto the bark. The house itself was a colonial-style monster, 4 white columns, black shutters, a front door big enough to make delivery people whisper swear words under their breath. Every year, my parents hosted what they called the Christmas Eve reception. It wasn't really about Christmas. It was about showing off. There were investors from my father's firm, donors from whatever charity my mother had attached herself to that year, and the right mix of neighbors with the kind of money that made their presence a form of social currency. I grew up in those rooms, watching my mother glide across the marble floors in silk, a perfect crystal of a woman, smiling just enough. My father moved differently. He filled spaces with his voice, with his laugh, with his business cards. They weren't cruel in a movie villain way. They just had a single, unwavering priority, the family image. Everything that reflected well on that image was rewarded. Everything that didn't was manicured away. My brother Ethan reflected well. Where I came home with dirt under my fingernails and a head full of plant Latin, Ethan came home with trophies. Captain of this. President of that. He got a full ride to an Ivy League university, and you would have thought he'd personally invented education, the way my parents talked about him. It's not like I wasn't smart. I got into good schools. I even had a scholarship offer in environmental design and landscape architecture. I still remember holding the letter in my hands, sitting at the kitchen island while the poinsettias my mother bought from a decorator sat perfectly centered, untouched, on the marble. "Mom," I had said, heart pounding, "they're offering to cover almost everything. I just need a little help with living expenses. I can work part-time," but she barely glanced at the letter. "Sweetheart, your brother's tuition is already more than enough right now. We all have to make sacrifices for the family. Besides, you like working with plants. You don't need university for that." My father had looked up from his laptop, adding, "You'll always have a place in the family business if you need stability. You can help with the properties, the upkeep. You're good with your hands. It's practical." It was presented as a compliment, but it felt like a door quietly closing in my face. So I did what they asked. I took a gap year to help out. When Ethan's second semester brought surprise costs and he called home in a panic, I picked up extra shifts at the local nursery and handed most of my savings to my parents. "Just this once," my mother had said, hugging me in that stiff way she had, like her bones were made of glass. "This is what family does," my father added. "We help each other." The unspoken part was clear: I was the one who helped. Ethan was the one who was helped. 1 year turned into 2. The nursery job turned into managing seasonal contracts. I took on private clients to design their gardens, then patios, then entire outdoor living spaces. Somewhere along the way, the owner of the nursery retired and offered to sell the business. "We can't help you with that," my father had said. "It's too risky. Besides, you don't really understand balance sheets. Stick to what you know." I bought it anyway. I found a small community bank that believed in my business plan more than my own parents did. I signed papers with shaking hands and then drove straight to the greenhouse behind the shop, breathing in the warm, damp air like it was oxygen after years of suffocating politeness. I renamed it Evergreen Studio and Gardens. I expanded the greenhouse, added a small design office, hired seasonal staff. I learned how to do payroll and contracts and taxes late at night, my laptop propped on a bag of potting soil. I met contractors who treated me with respect because I showed up, worked hard, and paid on time. Products delivered. Projects finished. Clients recommended me to their friends. My business passed 6 figures in revenue in the 3rd year. I didn't tell my parents. If I had, they would have asked what I planned to contribute back, and somehow my success would have become a resource for Ethan's next dream, or for plugging a hole in one of my father's questionable real estate investments. Instead, I just kept showing up at Christmas like the good daughter I was supposed to be, bringing wreaths for the front door, arranging garlands along the staircase, setting up poinsettias in tasteful clusters around the living room. My work looked expensive and magazine-ready. They never asked what it cost. They just assumed it was my way of pitching in. "Claire's good with that earthy stuff," my mother would say, waving a hand toward the greenery when guests complimented the decorations. She didn't really want a conventional career. Then, always, the pivot to Ethan. "Our son is in finance. New York. Very high level. We're so proud." The contrast was never accidental. Still, I stayed. I told myself that family was complicated, that they didn't mean anything by it, that words were just words. I had made that promise to myself, back when I turned down that scholarship: I will help my family until I can't anymore. The problem was, I kept moving the line of what "can't anymore" meant. By the time that particular December rolled around, my world looked very different from theirs. My morning started before sunrise in the greenhouse, the air fogged with humidity and the smell of wet soil. The heater hummed steadily, and my breath fogged in little clouds while I checked irrigation lines and misting schedules. My staff, Marco, who'd been doing hard landscaping longer than I'd been alive, and Jess, who could coax seedlings out of seeds that looked beyond hope, would arrive with travel mugs of coffee and teasing comments about my inability to take a day off. "Boss, you ever going to let someone else water these, or are you and the sprayer in a committed relationship?" Jess joked one morning, brushing snow off her hat as she stepped inside. "Maybe," I said, "when you stop over-fertilizing the rosemary." Our banter was easy, comfortable in a way my conversations with my own blood never were. Here, my work meant something. My hands were calloused, my back ached most evenings, but it was a good ache. A chosen ache. We were in the busiest season, holiday installations for restaurants, office lobbies, private homes, when my mother called about the bonsai. "Claire," she said, skipping the hello. "We need something truly special as a centerpiece this year. The Mortons and the Halperns are coming. They have a place in Aspen that's in Architectural Digest, you know. We can't just have a tree off a lot." I was standing between rows of winter-blooming hellebores, my phone wedged between my ear and shoulder, hands deep in a bag of soil. "Okay," I said slowly. "Do you have a budget in mind?" There was a pause. "Budget? Don't be ridiculous. This is family." "I was thinking that little tree you posted about. The one shaped like a spiral. It would look perfect next to the fireplace. Bring that." I wiped my hands on my jeans, staring at the condensation on the greenhouse glass. That little tree had taken 7 years of careful training and pruning. It was the most valuable living piece in my collection, already tentatively reserved by a client who understood its worth. "Mom, that specimen is, oh, Claire, honestly," she cut in, her voice taking on that tired, put-upon edge. "You work with plants. You'll grow another one. Your brother is making a big presentation that night to some potential partners for his fund. The least you can do is help make sure the house looks appropriate. It's important." There it was again, the hierarchy. His work was important. Mine was an aesthetic element. Decor. "I can bring it," I heard myself say, even as a part of me flinched. "But it's not a rental piece. If it goes, it stays. And I can't just, we'll talk about that later," she said briskly. "Come early on the 23rd to set up. Use the back entrance, please. We'll have catering and staff coming through the front, and I don't want mud tracked across the runner." The line went dead without a goodbye. I stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the gentle hiss of misting nozzles and the occasional drip of water. Outside, the sky was a flat, cold gray, the kind that made everything look a little harder than it was. In my world, when someone needed something last minute, I sent them a quote, they approved it, and we all knew where we stood. In my family's world, they called it love when I gave things away for free and loyalty when I said yes without complaint. I told myself it was just one more favor. One more Christmas. One more year where I showed up, did the work, kept the peace. I had no idea that bonsai would become the line in the sand. The thing about injustice in my family is that it never arrives as a dramatic explosion. It comes softly, wrapped in polite expectations, disguised as tradition or duty. It's a slow drip of small humiliations, so subtle that for years I convinced myself I was imagining them. But that day, the 23rd of December, there was no subtlety left. I arrived at the estate in the late afternoon, the sky already dimming into that deep winter blue that makes every window look like a glowing lantern. Snow dusted the gravel. The air smelled like pine and cold metal. My truck, caked in dried mud from our last installation, looked painfully out of place in the manicured driveway. As instructed, I parked in the back, near the service entrance where catering vans and staff usually unloaded. My breath fogged as I climbed out. In the truck bed, strapped down with the care of transporting a newborn, sat the spiral bonsai. Its needles shimmered with frost, each curve of the trunk shaped over years of patient training. Touching it always made my heartbeat slow, like it was reminding me to breathe. I covered it with a thermal cloth and unstrapped it slowly, speaking to it the way I did with all my trees. Easy now. Just one night. Then you go home. A lie, technically. My mother had already made it clear she assumed the tree was a gift. And I knew that once she displayed it, she'd refuse to let it leave. That was the unspoken rule. Anything I brought into that house became part of their world. As I was lowering the tree onto a rolling cart, the back door swung open. It was my brother, Ethan. He looked exactly as someone groomed by wealthy parents to be a golden child should look: tailored coat, hair done with deliberate carelessness, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. A champagne flute dangled from his hand even though it wasn't even 5 p.m. "Wow," he said, surveying the bonsai. "You actually brought it. Mom's going to lose her mind." "Good job, Claire." He said it like I'd fetched something from storage. Like I was staff. I straightened up. "It's not a decoration. It's a living piece. Be careful around it." He snorted. Yeah. "Look, just bring it in and set it by the fireplace. And try to be." His eyes flicked to my boots. Then my jacket. Then my hair. "A little less, worksite chic. We have important people here tonight." I opened my mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I wasn't told there were guests already." "There are always guests," he said, swirling the champagne. "Get used to it. This is a big night for me." I didn't respond. I just pushed the cart through the service hallways, narrow, beige corridors that felt like the guts of the house, humming with generators and stray heat from the kitchen. When I stepped into the main living room, I felt the familiar punch of contrast. The ceilings arched high, trimmed in gold leaf. A towering crystal chandelier scattered warm light over velvet armchairs and silver-framed photos of Ethan at various stages of achievement. A massive Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, decorated in a theme my mother chose each year, in this case, Nordic elegance. Whites, silvers, soft blues. Coordinated, curated, expensive. I moved slowly, both because of the fragile bonsai and because of the people drifting around the room. Men in tailored suits. Women with diamonds that caught the chandelier light. A few murmured hellos, confused about whether I was staff or family. Honestly, I wasn't sure myself. My mother appeared before me, gliding across the room like she was born to move through luxury. "There you are," she said, eyes landing on the tree with hungry approval. "Perfect. Just perfect. Bring it closer." Her hands fluttered as if conducting the air around it. I positioned it gently beside the fireplace. The warmth would not be ideal for the tree, but I'd only be gone overnight. It would survive. "Oh, it's stunning," she said. "Truly. People will think we commissioned this." I cleared my throat. "Mom, about the tree. It's not meant to stay here permanently. But she was already waving over a couple in designer coats, her social mask fully locked in place. "Come look at this, isn't it exquisite? My daughter made it." I hated that phrase. Not grew, not cultivated. Made it, like I was a hobbyist building crafts for a church fair. The couple nodded politely before being whisked away. My mother didn't thank me. She didn't ask about my business or costs or care instructions. She simply assumed ownership. As she drifted off, I stood there feeling oddly hollow. But this was nothing new. I'd long ago stopped expecting appreciation. I was wiping a smear of soil off my sleeve when I heard laughter from the adjoining room, the media room. A sound that was too loud, too rehearsed. And then I recognized Ethan's voice. Okay, go back, show the one where she's kneeling in the mud." That's the one I'm opening with. My stomach tightened. I wasn't supposed to be near the media room, but my feet moved before my brain could stop them. I followed the sound like someone walking toward a burning fuse. The doorway was slightly ajar. Inside, my parents and Ethan stood in front of the large projector screen, illuminated by the glow of a paused slideshow. And there it was, a photo of me, back bent, hair frizzed with humidity, hands buried in the wet soil of a spring installation. Someone must have taken it without my noticing. On the screen, in neat white text, someone had typed, "The family's free labor." My brother laughed so hard he had to hold onto the back of a leather chair. "Oh man, they're going to love this," he said. Picture it, right after the intro about excellence and tradition, boom. Claire in the mud. Then I say the line about how not everyone can handle the high standards of the Whitaker family. I froze. Every atom in my body seemed to crystallize. My mother shook her head lightly. The line about standards is good, but it needs more tact. Maybe say it with a softer tone. Or compare it to following one's passion. The joke works better if the audience thinks you're being supportive. My father folded his arms. Let's focus on Ethan's segment. This presentation is essentially his pitch. The humor will make him relatable. Investors eat that up. They were discussing my humiliation like it was a prop. A comedy sketch. A marketing strategy. My mother clicked to the next slide. A photo of me loading bags of mulch into my truck. Caption: "The one who took the scenic route and never came back." They chuckled as if this was the height of wit. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I just stared. "I'm telling you," Ethan said, sipping his champagne, "they're going to love this. And Claire won't care. She never does. She actually likes that grubby plant stuff." No one corrected him. No one said it was cruel. No one said I was family. And then my mother added the line that snapped something clean in me. Honestly, if she didn't want to be part of the joke, she should have made something of herself. I stepped back, the same way someone steps away from a predator. My heel brushed the doorframe. It made a soft sound. Ethan turned. "Claire? That you?" I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. I walked away. Past the fireplace. Past the guests. Past the bonsai I had brought like an offering to people who saw me as nothing more than a cautionary tale. I didn't run. Running would have made it look like they'd won. I walked with steady steps, through the back corridor, out the door, down the short path to where my truck waited like a loyal animal. The cold air hit me hard, but it felt cleaner than the air inside. I turned, marched back into the house through the service door, and returned to the living room. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't speak. I simply lifted the bonsai from its place, ignoring the startled gasps of guests, and carried it out the same way I had brought it in. Someone called my name. I didn't stop. When the truck door slammed shut behind the bonsai and its weight settled safely in the back, I stood there for a long moment in the snow. My breath rose in white plumes. That was the moment I understood something with bone-deep clarity. I had spent my life giving, helping, forgiving. And they had mistaken all of it for weakness. But they were about to learn that I was not weak. I was patient. And patience is what teaches you how to strike exactly when the roots are exposed. Driving away from the estate felt like crossing a border I hadn't realized existed. The roads were slick with snow, the world muted under its white blanket, and for once my mind wasn't racing, it was sharpening. Every mile between me and that house seemed to peel away another layer of noise, another lie I'd been telling myself about family and duty and gratitude. By the time I reached Evergreen Studio, the greenhouse windows glowed like a beacon through the dark. Warm lights spilled onto the snow, a soft reminder that there were places in this world where I wasn't an unwanted punchline. I backed the truck into the loading bay and turned off the engine. The silence pressed against my ears. Then, slowly, I climbed out and opened the tailgate. The bonsai looked serene, even after the nightmare evening. The delicate spiral of branches caught the faint light from the greenhouse. A century's worth of patience twisted into living form. "You're home," I whispered. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe. Just breathing. Just remembering that I had built something real, that my hands had created beauty and function and life in ways my family would never understand. The back door creaked open. "Claire." It was Marco, my foreman. Late 50s. Built like a retired bull. Voice like gravel dipped in honey. "What the hell are you doing here? Thought you were at your folks' Christmas extravaganza." I turned toward him. Something in my face must have given away more than I intended, because his expression softened in a way he rarely showed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. For a moment, I debated lying. Pretending it was fine. Pretending I hadn't just witnessed my own family practice humiliating me like I was a character in some absurd morality play. But my throat tightened, and before I could stop myself, I said, "They were going to use photos of me in the slideshow. To mock me. In front of investors. In front of everyone." Marco blinked slowly. Then he muttered something in Italian that I'm pretty sure was not a blessing. Jess came rushing out behind him, tightening her scarf. "What? Seriously? They did that?" "They were rehearsing it," I said, leaning back against the cold metal of the truck. Like it was entertainment. Jess shook her head in disbelief. "Your family is. Wow. Just wow. No offense, but they suck." "None taken," I whispered. They didn't give me pity, which I appreciated. They just stood there, forming a small, warm triangle of human presence against the night's cold indifference. "Come inside," Marco said finally, jerking his head toward the greenhouse. "You look like you need heat. And whiskey." "I don't drink whiskey." "Tonight you do." Inside, the greenhouse was humid and alive. A stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the Whitaker estate. This place had dirt under its nails, just like me. We sat at the old wooden table I used for planning installs. Marco poured a small amount of whiskey in a clay mug he'd made himself in some pottery class his daughter gifted him. I took a sip. It burned. "God, that's awful." "It's expensive," he said. Jess drummed her fingers on the table. "So what now? You going to talk to them? Tell them off?" I shook my head. "Talking doesn't work. They don't hear me." Jess raised her eyebrows. "So, revenge?" I didn't answer. Not out loud, anyway. Because something had already started forming in the back of my mind, a seed of an idea, fed by anger and clarity and the realization that I had spent far too long letting them use me. But seeds need time to germinate. And before anything else, I needed information. Real information. Not emotional interpretations. Facts. "Marco," I said slowly. "Remember that holding company we set up 2 years ago? Overheard Holdings?" He nodded. "Of course. For privacy. You didn't want contractors or clients knowing what you were investing in." Jess's eyes widened. "Wait, are you talking about the thing you never tell us about?" I took a breath. "Yeah. That thing." Overheard Holdings was a small, quiet entity. Something my lawyer had encouraged me to set up once my business stabilized. He said that when you worked with wealthy clients, privacy became a commodity just like anything else. Through Overheard, I had invested in a handful of commercial properties, a small residential block, and, though I rarely even thought about it anymore, some debt portfolios my lawyer said were undervalued but safe. Why? Marco asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the certainty that the ground beneath my life was about to shift. I need to check something. My lawyer, Daniel, answered on the second ring. Claire. Are you all right? It's late. I'm fine, I lied. I need information about one of the assets in the Overheard portfolio. He paused. I never called him after business hours. Which one? The Whitaker estate. Silence. Then a soft exhale. I wondered when you'd ask about that. My heart thudded once, hard. What do you mean? You really don't know? He asked. I glanced at Marco and Jess, both staring at me with a kind of collective breath-holding. No, I said. Tell me. Well, he began carefully, the estate was refinanced 4 years ago. Bad terms, variable rates. Not my doing, I wasn't representing you then. But the loan performed poorly, late payments, missed payments. My mouth went dry. I had suspected financial strain, but not this. Daniel continued, the debt was transferred 3 times. Eventually, it landed in a distressed asset bundle we purchased for Overheard Holdings. I gripped the edge of the table. So Overheard owns, what, exactly? Technically, he said, Overheard is the mortgage holder of the Whitaker estate. Marco let out a low whistle. Jess slapped her hand over her mouth. I felt nothing and everything at once. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly. How long? I whispered. About 9 months. A pause. And they've been in default for 6 months. Half a year where my family had been living in that mansion, hosting events, flaunting wealth, while secretly being behind on payments to me, without knowing it was me. I closed my eyes. It wasn't revenge yet. It wasn't even justice. It was just truth. Cold, clean truth. What are my options? I asked. You can restructure the loan, he said. You can forgive the debt. You can foreclose. Legally, the property is within the window for eviction proceedings because of missed payments. He cleared his throat. Claire, why are you asking this? I opened my eyes. Snow tapped softly against the greenhouse windows. The bonsai sat peacefully on its table, needles glistening under the grow lights. My family is planning to humiliate me tomorrow, I said. Publicly. In front of everyone they respect. More silence. Then Daniel spoke in a very different tone, quieter, almost reverent. And you own their house. Apparently. Jess whispered, holy crap. But Marco just leaned back, crossed his arms, and nodded once, as if the universe had finally done something sensible. What do you want to do? Daniel asked. I didn't answer right away. Because wanting and deciding were very different things. I had wanted their respect for years. I had wanted fairness, acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. But deciding, that was new. Deciding meant action. Deciding meant consequences. My thoughts flicked back to the slide with the caption free labor. The joke about standards. My mother's voice saying I should have made something of myself. They had built an entire narrative where I was the failure, the entertainment, the cautionary tale. And now I held the deed to their illusion. I need eviction papers, I said softly. Formal. Legal. Served tomorrow. Daniel inhaled sharply. Tomorrow? On Christmas Eve? Yes. That will, 'cause quite a scene. I met Jess's eyes. Then Marco's. Both of them nodded, almost imperceptibly. That's the idea, I said. When I hung up, the greenhouse was very quiet. Jess let out the breath she had been holding. You're really going to do it? I touched the bonsai's curved trunk with a fingertip. Its patience had shaped it into something strong. Beautiful, but unyielding. They were going to humiliate me publicly, I said. So I'll give them a public moment too, just not the one they planned. Marco raised his mug in a solemn toast. To roots, he said. The deeper they go, the harder they are to pull out. I lifted my mug. To truth, I murmured. We drank. Outside, snow continued to fall, softly, steadily, like the world was being wiped clean. Inside, something in me settled. Not vengeance. Not anger. Resolution. The next morning, I prepared. Not frantically. Not like someone scrambling for control. Calmly. Precisely. Like someone pruning a tree. Daniel emailed me the documents: foreclosure notice, eviction timeline, full statement of debt owed. Signed, sealed, stamped. A process server would deliver them at a time of my choosing. I replied with one line: deliver at 8:45 p.m. They will be mid-presentation. My family had planned their big Christmas slideshow for exactly 8:30 p.m. I knew the timing because Ethan had bragged about it during Thanksgiving. The peak emotional moment, he'd said. It's all about pacing. Yes. Pacing. I could do pacing too. I chose my outfit carefully: simple black dress, thick wool coat, the same work boots they hated. I tied my hair back the way I did when I was designing something precise. Not fancy. Not subdued. Functional. When I pulled up to the estate at 8:20 p.m., parking attendants rushed forward, confused by the mud-spattered truck. I'm family, I said. They stepped aside. Inside, the house buzzed with anticipation. Guests holding glasses of champagne moved toward the media room, murmuring about the presentation. The chandeliers glowed. The air smelled like cinnamon and ego. No one greeted me. No one asked where I'd been. Perfect. I slipped into the back of the media room just as Ethan stepped on stage. Lights dimmed. A massive grin split his face. Thank you all for being here tonight, he said. We Whitakers believe in excellence, tradition, and above all, click. The slideshow began. The first few slides were what I expected: golden childhood memories, Ethan's achievements, their curated family narrative. Then I saw it, the slide with me in the mud, queued up next. He took a sip of champagne. Now, he said, this next part is a little family humor, but before he could click, a voice rang out from the doorway. Process server for the Whitaker residence. The room froze. Every head turned. A man in a crisp suit stepped forward. Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker, he said loudly. Legal notice of foreclosure and eviction. Gasps rippled through the room like wind through leaves. My parents stared, pale. Ethan's face drained of color. What is this? My father sputtered. The server held out the envelope. Your mortgage holder has issued formal proceedings due to 6 months of non-payment. Effective immediately. My mother let out a strangled sound. Non-payment? That's impossible. Who even holds our mortgage? The room was silent. Then I stepped forward. I do, I said. And the world, for one perfect moment, was still. I do. 2 words. Small. Light. Almost nothing. And yet, when they left my mouth, they seemed to rearrange the molecules in the room. Dozens of faces turned toward me. Investors. Neighbors. Family friends. All of them staring as if I'd just walked onto the stage with a lit match in a room full of gasoline. My father blinked. "Claire," he said slowly, voice strained around my name. "This is not the time for one of your episodes." I almost laughed. An episode. That was what he called any moment I broke the script. Any time I didn't just smile and nod and carry something heavy through the back door. The process server glanced between us, clearly sensing the undercurrents. "The documents are in your name, Ms. Whitaker," he said, addressing me now. "Overheard Holdings, correct?" I nodded. "Correct." My mother's hand flew to her pearls, fingers digging in like she thought she could strangle the situation into submission. "This is absurd. There must be a mistake. We need to speak to our attorney immediately." "You probably should," I said softly. "Though in this case, you'll be calling mine." A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Ethan recovered faster than my parents. He stepped closer to me, his stage smile strained but still plastered on. "Okay, Claire," he said in that patronizing tone he used when I was 12 and he was 15 and explaining the stock market with a cereal box. "Whatever point you're trying to make, it's not funny. You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing myself. Not them. Not the family. My jaw tightened. "You were about to embarrass me," I said, nodding toward the projector screen. "So I thought we could balance the scales." The tech controlling the slides shifted awkwardly. The next slide, my mud-covered form, hovered faintly in the corner of the screen's preview. "Turn that off," my mother hissed. Her voice cracked on the last word. No one moved. The process server cleared his throat. "For the record," he said, holding the envelope a little higher, "these documents indicate that the Whitaker residence has been in default for 6 months. The mortgage was reassigned to Overheard Holdings 9 months ago. The holder, Ms. Claire Whitaker, has chosen to proceed with foreclosure. You will be required to vacate the premises within the timeframe specified." My father's face reddened, a deep, blotchy red I'd only seen when deals fell through or when someone dared to challenge him publicly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Our daughter does not own our house. She plays with plants for a living." A murmur rippled through the guests. There it was, laid bare in one sentence. His entire view of me. Of my work. Of my worth. I took a slow breath. "4 years ago," I began, my voice steady, "you refinanced the estate to cover Ethan's startup investments and some of your firm's temporary liquidity issues." A couple of his partners shifted uncomfortably at the back of the room. "You signed a variable rate mortgage on unfavorable terms," I continued. "The payments increased. You fell behind. The debt was bundled. Sold. Transferred. To a distressed asset fund." My mother stared at me like I was speaking another language. "When Overheard Holdings, my holding company, had the opportunity to purchase that fund," I said, "my attorney flagged the Whitaker estate. He thought it might be a conflict of interest. I decided it wasn't. I told myself I was helping." The word tasted bitter now. "I thought if I owned the mortgage quietly, I could protect you," I said. "Give you time to catch up without the bank breathing down your neck. You didn't know I had control, but I did. I could have foreclosed months ago. I didn't." My father's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Across the room, someone whispered, "She owns the house?" "And the land," the process server added helpfully. "The documentation is clear." My mother shook her head, as if trying to dislodge reality. You can't do this. It's Christmas." There it was. The shield they'd always used. The reason I'd always swallowed the sharp edges. It's Christmas. We're family. I met her eyes. You were going to humiliate me tonight, I said. On Christmas. In front of everyone. You think the holiday protects you from consequences, but it only ever protected you from your own guilt. A flush climbed her cheeks. You're overreacting. It was a joke. A joke, I repeated. Where I'm the punchline. Again. Ethan stepped in, hands raised, trying to reclaim control. Claire, he said, be reasonable. Even if what you're saying is true, which I highly doubt, you can't just evict your parents. That's insane. Think about what people will say. I looked past him, at the guests. At their carefully neutral faces. At the discomfort, the curiosity, the quiet cataloging of a scandal in progress. What people say, I replied, stopped being my problem when I realized the version of me you told them about wasn't real. I turned slightly so my voice would carry. For those of you who don't know me, I said, I'm Claire. I run Evergreen Studio and Gardens, the business that has been providing many of you with your winter installations, your patio designs, your rooftop gardens. I pay my staff fair wages. I pay my contractors on time. I pay my debts. I let that last word hang in the air. My family, I continued, does not pay theirs. At least not to me. Someone near the front looked down, embarrassed. My father found his voice again, but it came out rough around the edges. This is uncalled for. You're making us look like fools. You did that, I said quietly. I'm just turning on the lights. The process server, sensing his job was done, placed the envelope on the small table by the projector and stepped back. The notice has been officially served, he announced. Merry Christmas. Then he left. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence. No music. No clinking glasses. Just the hum of the projector and the ragged sound of my mother's breathing. You can't possibly mean this, she whispered. We're your parents. I felt something ache in my chest at that word. Parents. Theoretically, it meant safety. Protection. Love. In practice, with them, it had meant obligation. Performance. Use. I mean every word, I said. You don't see me as a daughter. You see me as a resource. As labor. As a story to tell about what happens when someone doesn't live up to your definition of success. I gestured toward the screen. You turned my life into a warning label. Ethan muttered, it was a few jokes, Claire. You're nuking our entire lives over a few jokes. I looked at him. No, I said. I'm ending your ability to keep using me without consequence. My voice didn't rise. I didn't shout. I just stated it. The way I would state a fact about soil composition or light levels. Around us, the crowd began to fracture. A few of my father's partners slipped out quietly, suddenly remembering other commitments. Some of my mother's charity friends hovered uncertainly by the door, not sure which way the social wind was blowing yet. An older couple from the neighborhood, people who had hired me for their backyard redesign last summer, caught my eyes. The wife gave me the smallest nod. Not approval, exactly. But understanding. My family noticed. And that, I realized, hurt them more than anything I could say. Their social currency was draining out of the room, one quiet exit at a time. I'd thought this moment would feel triumphant. Cinematic. Like revenge tasted sweet. It didn't. It felt like standing in a burned field, knowing I'd lit the match, but also knowing the fire had started long before I ever struck it. I just stopped pretending not to see the smoke. If the first twist was that I owned their house, the second twist was realizing that my family still hadn't understood what that meant. Even after the foreclosure notice, even after their guests began slipping out in embarrassed silence, even after Ethan's carefully planned slideshow lay frozen mid-transition on a giant screen, they still thought this was negotiable. Fixable. Containable. Reversible, if they applied enough pressure. My mother was the first to regain her footing. She stepped forward, smoothing her dress with trembling hands, but lifting her chin with familiar arrogance. "Claire, listen," she said in a forced whisper, though half the room could hear her. "You've made your point. We overstepped. We didn't realize the slideshow was upsetting you. Your brother was just trying to inject some humor into the evening." "Mom," I replied, "you helped him write the jokes." Her lips tightened. "That's not the point. What matters is that we're willing to amend things. Adjust. But there is absolutely no reason to escalate this into something public or legal. You need to stop this." There it was, their belief that all consequences could be undone if they simply performed civility hard enough. A lifetime of practice had taught them that appearances were reality. But I no longer lived in their world. My father stepped closer. He didn't bother pretending to be gentle. "You don't understand the implications of what you're doing," he snapped. "Foreclosure on this house will make us look financially incompetent. It will destroy relationships I've spent decades building. It will ruin Ethan's pitch." I looked at him evenly. "You weren't worried about ruining my life tonight." "That's different," he hissed. That was humor. This is real. The hypocrisy was so vast, so flawlessly shameless, that for a moment I couldn't even form words. Ethan stepped forward, trying to reclaim his golden child authority. "Claire," he said, softening his voice like a salesman closing a deal, "let's be reasonable. You don't want to do this. You're emotional right now. Hurt. I get it. But once you calm down, we can figure something out. We can work out a new repayment schedule. Just undo this little stunt." Stunt. He said it without irony. I scanned their faces. 3 people so accustomed to control that they couldn't fathom anyone taking it away from them. Finally, I said, "This isn't emotional for me." My mother scoffed. "Then what would you call it?" "Strategic." That silenced them. Completely. For the first time in my life, they looked at me like someone whose decisions mattered. My mother recovered first. "Claire, sweetheart, you don't have to be strategic with family." "I've spent my entire life being strategic with you," I answered. "You just never noticed." The second twist wasn't something I revealed aloud. It was something I revealed next. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a slim envelope, the same kind my family used for holiday cards. Gold-edged. Embossed. Elegant. Ethan frowned. "What's that?" "A gift," I said. "Since you wanted one so badly tonight." I handed it to him. He didn't open it. Not yet. But he should have, because that envelope, more than the eviction notice, carried the true demolition charge. Inside it was the documentation I had spent the afternoon preparing with Daniel, a formal termination of their occupancy lease. A full itemization of debt owed. An immediate freeze on all attempts to refinance or transfer ownership. A statement of intent to reclaim the property for business development, effective upon foreclosure completion. My father laughed, sharp and humorless. "You wouldn't dare." I held his gaze. "Wouldn't I?" He looked around the room, as though expecting someone to intervene. But every pair of eyes avoided his. No one was going to save him from the daughter he'd spent years ignoring. Then, finally, inevitably, he opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Then the signature line. His face went slack. "Business development," he croaked. "Are you insane? This is our home." "No," I said, "it's my property. For now, you're tenants. Tenants in violation of their lease." My mother pressed a hand to her temple. "What possible development could you put here?" "A larger headquarters," I said simply. "Evergreen Studio has outgrown its current location. Your ballroom is roughly the size I need for a design center. The East Wing could house administrative offices. The grounds would be excellent for client demonstrations, outdoor living space installations, seasonal showcases." Their jaws dropped in near-perfect synchronization. "And the greenhouse I'll add in the south garden?" I continued. "It'll be far better than the one I have now." Ethan choked. "You're kidding." "No, you're turning the family estate into a plant shop." I smiled. "A design and horticulture studio. High-end. Sustainable. Profitable. Something I made of myself." That last line landed exactly where I wanted it to. My mother stumbled back a step, eyes brimming with outrage. Not sorrow, not fear, but pure indignation that her daughter would dare become successful without her permission. "You are destroying this family," she spat. "No," I said. "I'm ending your ability to destroy me." And yet, even then, they still didn't fully grasp the depth of my plan. Because the real twist wasn't just the eviction. It wasn't taking back their house. It wasn't turning their prized estate into the headquarters of the business they had spent a decade belittling. It was the way I timed every piece. The way I layered every step. The way I used their obsession with image as the very weapon that undid them. I had known exactly what would happen tonight. Attorney on standby. Process server time to the minute. Documents prepared with absolute precision. A gift envelope disguised to look harmless. A crowd full of witnesses who would leave talking. I wasn't reacting. I was executing. Because when you spend your life studying how things grow, trees, businesses, people, you learn something important. The same patience that shapes roots can also sever them. And tonight, I wasn't pruning anymore. I was harvesting. My father finally found his voice again. "You can't possibly think this makes you look good." I shrugged. "I'm not trying to look good. I'm trying to be free." My mother swayed, clutching the edge of a chair. "So that's it? You're cutting ties? You're abandoning us?" I met her eyes. "No," I said. "You abandoned me years ago. I'm just signing the paperwork." And with that, I turned and walked toward the door. No drama. No tears. Just quiet footsteps on polished floors. Behind me, the room remained still, an entire world collapsing under the weight of truth. I didn't look back. Because this time, the story wasn't theirs. It was mine. I didn't leave the estate entirely, not yet. I stepped out into the cold night, letting the breath of winter hit my face like a baptism. Snow drifted lazily from the sky, glowing under the warm lanterns that lined the walkway. My boots sank into the thin layer of white, grounding me in a way marble floors never could. Behind me, through the tall windows, I could still see the silhouettes of guests whispering, my family scrambling, Ethan gesturing wildly as he flipped through the papers in disbelief. The once perfect Whitaker Christmas Eve reception was collapsing like a tower built on rotten wood. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't my job to hold it up. But I wasn't done, not yet. The final chord of this symphony required an audience. And I had one. I walked around the side of the house, toward the patio, the place where my mother always staged photos for holiday cards. There, beside the French doors, stood a row of neatly decorated furs and a few late guests stepping outside for fresh air. When they noticed me, their murmured conversations stopped. A few tried to hide their curiosity, most didn't bother. "Claire," one of them ventured, a man from my father's firm. "Is it true? About the foreclosure?" I faced them calmly. "It's not a foreclosure," I said. "It's an eviction based on non-payment. I bought the mortgage months ago." Another guest, a woman who'd once hired me to redesign her rooftop terrace, raised a brow. "But, why would your parents owe you money?" "They didn't know they did," I said. "They also didn't think I was capable of anything beyond arranging their Christmas decorations." Tonight's presentation made that very clear. A ripple of uncomfortable understanding passed through them. One woman hesitated. "Is it true they were going to mock you? Publicly?" I didn't have to answer. My silence was confirmation enough. And then something remarkable happened. They nodded. Not in judgment, but in recognition. Sympathy. Even, quietly, respect. People who had only ever known the polished version of my family were finally seeing the truth. The Whitakers weren't a dynasty of excellence. They were a facade supported by the daughter they tried to erase. And that was the exact moment my family stepped outside. My father burst through the doors first, his face a storm of embarrassment and fury. "Claire," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "You need to come back inside. Now." I pulled my arm free. "Don't touch me." His eyes widened, not because of the words, but because people were watching. My mother followed, mascara smudged, voice trembling. "You can't do this. You're humiliating us." "You plan to humiliate me," I said evenly. "This is simply the truth catching up." Ethan emerged last, the envelope clutched in his hand like a death warrant. "Come on, Claire. You've made your point. We'll scrap the slideshow. We'll apologize. Isn't that what you want?" The sincerity in his voice was thin, fragile, a sheet of ice over deep water. "No," I said. "What I want is freedom." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Look, if you go through with this eviction, you'll destroy everything. Dad's firm. Mom's charities. My fund. Our name. Our name," I repeated softly. "That's all you care about." He didn't deny it. "This isn't you," he tried again. "You're being vindictive." I tilted my head. "Do you know what vindictive means, Ethan?" He blinked. "It means causing harm where none is warranted. What I'm doing isn't vindictive. It's corrective." My father exploded. "You think you can run a company? You think you're better than us? You're a gardener." That word struck like a thrown stone. But the impact didn't wound me. It landed at my feet, harmless. "Exactly," I said. "I'm a gardener. Which means I know when something is too diseased to save." Gasps fluttered across the patio. My mother's breath hitched. "We are your family." I met her eyes. The eyes I had once desperately hoped to impress. "You stopped being my family when you stopped seeing me as a person." Tears welled in her eyes, not the soft tears of remorse, but the hot sting of someone whose control is slipping. Ethan stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "It makes me sovereign." He froze. A single word, and it was the truth of everything. I wasn't above them. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't seeking revenge for revenge's sake. I was simply governing myself, finally. The door behind us opened again, and the process server reappeared, holding a clipboard. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, nodding politely. I have the confirmation forms. The eviction process is officially initiated. My father lunged toward him. Stop this. We can pay. We'll refinance. That won't be possible, the server said calmly. Your mortgage holder has frozen transfer and refinance attempts. My father turned to me, horrified. You froze it? Yes. Why? So you can't run from the consequences. He let out a broken sound, half outrage, half disbelief. Claire, my mother pleaded, stepping closer. We raised you. No, I said. You raised an assistant for your son. You raised unpaid labor. You raised a prop. You did not raise a daughter. Silence fell, heavy, final. You can't walk away from us, Ethan said. I smiled sadly. I'm not walking away. I took a step back. I'm walking home. A few guests clapped, quietly at first, then louder. Not a celebration. An acknowledgement. A recognition that the truth had finally spoken. My family recoiled from the applause as if it burned. And that was the moment I knew I had ended their performance. Their illusion. Their story. The house behind them looked different now, no longer an ancestral monument, but an empty stage where the curtain had finally dropped. I turned toward my truck. Snow crunched under my boots, steady and sure. Behind me, my mother called out one last time, desperation shredding her voice. What are we supposed to do now? I paused. Half turned. Ask your landlord, I said. Then I walked into the winter night, feeling, for the first time in years, completely, breathtakingly free. Snow was falling again when the next December rolled around, soft and unhurried, like the world had decided to move at my pace for once. Evergreen's studio had outgrown the greenhouse months earlier. Just as I'd told my family that night, I filed the final paperwork, completed the foreclosure, and legally reclaimed the Whitaker estate as the new headquarters for my business. It took time to transform the property, not because it was difficult, but because I refused to rush what needed to be done with intention. The chandeliers stayed. The marble floors stayed. But everything else? Reimagined. The ballroom became the design center, its echoing cold replaced with warm wood tables, layout boards, and swatches of materials under soft lights. The East Wing, once a shrine to Ethan's achievements, became administrative offices for my growing team. The old study turned into a consultation room for high-end clients. And the South Garden, that was my masterpiece. The new greenhouse rose from the lawn like a cathedral of glass and steel, warm with life even in the dead of winter. Inside it, illuminated by the soft glow of suspended lanterns, stood the spiral bonsai, the same one I had rescued from their Christmas party. It was the centerpiece now, not of a show meant to impress, but of a home built on intention, patience, and earned respect. I renamed the property, the Evergreen Estate. My family's name no longer appeared anywhere. Not on the gate. Not on the letterhead. Not in the story being written here. And somehow, that felt less like erasure and more like truth. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after everything erupted, I stood on the balcony overlooking my greenhouse. Inside, my staff and closest friends moved around a long wooden table, setting out food and lighting candles for our holiday dinner. Laughter drifted through the air, warm and genuine, unpolished and perfect. My chosen family. The people who saw me. Who valued me. Who never once asked me to shrink. As I leaned against the railing, feeling the quiet peace of the moment, my phone buzzed. A number I recognized, even though I hadn't saved it. My mother. For a moment, old instinct tightened my chest. The reflex to answer, to soothe, to give. Then I exhaled. I let the phone ring twice. 3 times. 4. On the 5th ring, I hit decline. A few seconds later, a text appeared. We need help. Can we talk? I read it. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney with a single instruction: handle this. Then I turned off my phone. Not out of cruelty, but out of closure. Inside the greenhouse, Marco waved at me from the dinner table. Jess lit the last candle. One of our new interns tuned a guitar, warming up for a few carols they insisted they could play, mostly in key. I walked back inside, the warmth fogging my glasses. Claire. Jess called. We're starting. Come sit. I took my place at the head of the table, not because I needed the power, but because they insisted I deserved the honor. As the lights shimmered on the glass walls and the bonsai glowed softly behind us, I felt something settle inside me. Not vengeance. Not triumph. Peace. A peace I had built with my own hands, seed by seed, choice by choice. My life no longer revolved around a family who couldn't see me. It revolved around a world I had cultivated, one where roots were deep, growth was earned, and love was real. When the first toast was raised, Marco lifted his glass toward me. To the boss, he said. Who showed us that pruning the dead branches is the only way to let the rest grow. Laughter rippled around the table. I raised my glass back. To new traditions, I said. And as the room filled with warmth and music and the sound of people who actually cared, I realized something simple and profound: I hadn't destroyed Christmas. I'd reclaimed it. For the first time in my life, it finally felt like mine. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.